Okay, hi everyone. Happy Friday. Thank you all for joining. Essentially, during these uncertain times, we are constantly inundated with bad news, and unfortunately, there isn't anything happening too fast for business owners to deal with the sort of the situation, right? So, mid-sized and small businesses today account for roughly about 50% of the GDP. These are the very companies that also employ about half of the private sector jobs, and most importantly, they act as a catalyst for innovation. And I think for us, uh, being business leaders, we have a responsibility to be to be thoughtful and also to just move things forward based on the facts that we have at hand. So my intent for putting this webinar together is to reach out to my network and folks that are on this panel and really seek their guidance as well as advice if they have any relevant to everything that's going on. We, as business leaders, have the responsibility to assess the situation, make measurable actions, and most importantly, invoke our entrepreneurial spirit to get through times like this. So I'm very, very thankful and excited to have this panel. Our panel consists of Dr. Jahangir Rahman. He is an internal medicine physician at New York Physicians and also an assistant clinical professor of medicine at Columbia University. I'm also joined by Mary Jane Dittroyer. She's a certified dietitian nutritionist, as well as an exercise physiologist who has her own private practice. I will make sure that everyone in chat have their link to their website as well as profile. I'm also thankful to have Bill Carmody, who is one of SAMAI advisor, join us. Bill is a former TEDx speaker, also an author and an executive coach. Ashwini Anubarajan is also someone that I'm very, very happy to have. She is a TED resident, head of WeWork Labs, Tri-State, and also an investor. And that last but not least, I'm also joined by Evelyn Chowdhury. She is our operating officer at SAMAI. She's also a public health professional who worked with Columbia University's National Center of Disaster Preparedness during both Katrina and H1N1 outbreak. So without further ado, I'll move ahead. Those of you that are in the audience, we will essentially ask questions to our panelists, and then towards the end, answer any questions that you might have. So please feel free to use the chat option in Zoom to ask your questions, and we'll definitely try to get to them before the event finishes to the best of our abilities. And of course, myself, I'm Raj Chowdhury. I'm the CEO of SAMAI, and I'm honored to have all of you on this webinar. So Dr. Rahman, I'll start with you if that's okay. It seems like the only thing that could really help us get some certainty during this uncertain times is a vaccine. And there are some sort of thoughts and hope around the fact that around sort of this notion that the virus might subside a little bit in terms of how fast it spreads during summertime. What can you share with us that would shed some light on that?
Well, listen, I think in general, RNA viruses and this particular coronavirus and all coronaviruses are RNA viruses are very difficult to come up with a vaccine. HIV is an RNA virus. It's just the way the viruses replicate, the way the viruses change their genomes. It's just hard to, very difficult to get vaccines. Unlike there are some vaccines against some viruses, for instance, varicella, which is chickenpox. There's a vaccine against hepatitis B and hepatitis A. Those tend to be easier viruses to target. The DNA viruses, they're easier to make a vaccine against. Still haven't gotten a vaccine against HIV, so it's a big challenge, So I think that is the critical point. These viruses are very difficult to try to navigate. They have spontaneous mutations all the time. They have a wild type, and then when you treat them, they become a different type. That's what happened with HIV viruses. So the more antiviral medications that are out there to treat them, the viruses mutate over time. And that's why it's been a challenge even to get a vaccine against HIV. And the whole world was collaborating. to try to get an HIV vaccine. There's never been a vaccine against any coronaviruses. For instance, our practice at New York Physicians in New York, we're one of the few that actually had a biofire analyzer in the office. We were testing 4 different coronaviruses so any patients would come in with viral syndromes. Not this particular strain, as you guys know. This strain is a new strain. We'll be able to check it in a few weeks. But there's a coronavirus 229, HK1, NL6, OC4 that we test for in the office. So there's a lot of different strains. It's a very challenging vaccine. Listen, numerous countries are involved. They have the whole, pretty much the whole Chinese industrial medical complex is involved in trying to create a vaccine. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge to try to determine what part of the virus should be targeted, what we should be looking for, what part of the virus actually causes infection. How do we then get a vaccine to target that part of those genes of the virus to try to neutralize it? It's a challenge.
You know, that's a sobering reality, right? I mean, you know, you mentioned the sort of the Chinese government being involved. It was really sort of a relief for New Yorkers to see that the U.S. military industrial complex is sort of sort of helping out a little bit. So you know, we're hoping that the R&D laboratories that the government has for biological warfare are now essentially turned on to focus on this, and hopefully this is once in a lifetime opportunity for all of these agencies to kind of rise up to the challenge. So we're hoping that it is something that happens soon. And with regards to summer and warmer weather, what are your thoughts as far as the virus's ability to spread during winter climate and versus warmer climate?
Listen, I haven't seen any real evidence so far that it's being limited in warm countries. So far in definitely there's definitely a belt where it's propagating, and but there's been cases in the Middle East, especially the southern Middle East, which is not cold, and the previous even H1N1 epidemic, which started in 2009, by September there were 90 million cases after that one case in January. And it wasn't limited. Even the flu virus at the time, which tends to be seasonal, the seasonal distribution, even that virus at that time was not seasonal. It would just wave upon wave of people getting the virus in the summer because we did not have a predetermined immunity for it. So it's a challenge. I think Dr. Tony Fauci, what part of the political spectrum you are, left or right, he's probably the most heralded and smartest physician in that space in this country and probably in the world. And I think he's going to have all the machinery and his knowledge base apparatus on this thing. So I think that is the positive note.
Yeah, no, thanks. That's really good to hear. I mean, I honestly think that this is the center of innovation. People talk about different economies in different countries. I think if U.S. has one thing going for it, it's not just a democracy, it's also the fact that it's a very, very innovative country. The fact that we're on this Zoom call over internet came from here. So if there's anywhere where I have hope, it is the United States. So thank you, Dr. Rahman, for your feedback on those questions. Mary Jane, you are both a nutritionist and an exercise physiologist. What advice do you have for us in terms of fortifying our immunity, as well as staying physically fit now that we're all confined to our own homes?
Oh, okay. So it's a pleasure to be here. The first thing is the big picture, and the big picture is to provide structure. Everybody's structure for the way they eat. Structure's kind of gone out of the picture. So make sure you stick with a structure with your meals, eat them regularly. You need to eat a lot of fruits and vegetables because they provide the vitamins and minerals that help to boost our immune system. Ginger and garlic are great because they are antiviral. Rosemary and thyme you can cook with. Again, they're antiviral. Foods that are rich in zinc are also important because zinc's important for the immunity. Vitamin C rich foods, so think broccoli and spinach. Eat some of them raw because heat kills vitamin C. Chicken soup. Chicken soup actually has carnosine in it, and it has been shown to help fight the flu virus. So, and it doesn't have to be homemade. You can get it in a can. You can get it in prepackaged, sealed containers at the grocery stores. Probiotics and fermented foods actually provide the gut with good bacteria to help immunity. And berries, antioxidants, oranges, grapefruit. So those are foods. Make sure you get adequate protein. Protein provides the building blocks for the cells in our immune system. So, structured meals, protein, fruits and vegetables, and carbs. Carbs provide energy. You don't want to have a lack of energy. It also helps keep the blood sugar stable. And that's that's an important part of this. There's going to be emotional eating going on right now. And so if blood sugar gets low, you're going to crave starches and you're going to crave sugar. So it's not a problem to do some emotional eating, but stay connected to that, and eat all these foods. As far as exercise goes, moderate intensity is better than high intensity, because high intensity exercise actually reduces immunity. So think moderate. I think we should follow the guidelines. People should be exercising in less dense areas at less dense times. I found womenshealthmagazine.com and menshealthmagazine.com are providing lots of information and apps for people to use at home to help them. I know my gym that's closed is providing apps for people. So those things can help. Doing large muscle exercises, squats, lunges, push-ups, planks. If you have bands at home, you can use those. But structure, try to stay connected to your emotions and what may be getting in the way of you doing these things for yourself.
Hey, Raz, you're on
mute. I realized I muted myself. I have two kids in the apartment, so I didn't want the distraction. But no, this is Mary Jane. This is really helpful. I think the fact that we have options to not completely block this off, but at least be prepared nutritionally and also physically is very helpful. And I'm so glad we're recording this, because you've just given us a tremendous amount of insight in such a short period of time. So I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Okay, great. So Bill, I've known you for 5 years almost. You are a very influential speaker, and more importantly, you're someone who guides CEOs. You've guided CEOs during rough seas as well as calm seas. And now that we are in rough seas, what advice do you have for us to sort of look at the glass half full?
Thank you, Raz. I appreciate you having me on this panel today. The thing that's fascinating is that riches are made in downturns. And I think what's interesting for business owners is that as bad as things feel right now, with the stock market crashing and people working from home and coming up with all the new systems, where this chaos creates opportunity. And if you think about sort of the most richest people in the world, most of the businesses were founded and started either at the decline or just following a decline of a major stock market crash. If you look at the history of Dale Carnegie, if you look at Warren Buffett, you see like how the actual fortunes are made during these downturns. And so really what it comes down to is to start by just calming yourself down. And I think this is the mental side of the health that we're talking about. So in addition to your physical health, there's the mental sanity, which is to stop listening to all the negative self-talk that tends to happen. Like, oh my God, am I going to lose my job? Am I going to have to lay off my team members? Like all that negative chatter stops you from focusing and looking around at what's really available to us right now. And what's beautiful about this is if you were to stop and say, what's the gift in this? And that's a really hard question to answer when you're really in panic mode, when you're in fear and anxiety and whatnot. But if you can let that go, you can say, what is the true opportunity? And so for many businesses, it might have to be a pivot. There might be some changes here. I, for one, do a lot of public speaking, and conferences are being canceled left and right. A lot of the workshops that I do, I can't go into offices anymore because literally people are working from home. And in this moment, nobody's coming into the office. So this is the opportunity to say, well, what else can I be doing? And when you think about sort of changing your structure, this can actually be one of the biggest gifts in the sense that it helps you with things that have scale, understanding like how to do things differently, really taking a hard look at your process, being able to create change there. And as I said about pivoting, it's thinking about what are the opportunities that are existing in this marketplace. And so Tony Robbins likes to say, winter is my season. And what he means by that is that when everything is dead and dormant, is the best time to plant seeds. It's the best time to start inserting all the opportunity and growth that you can create, because what happens after winter? Spring, right? Massive growth, massive opportunity. So if you can grow in down times and really create a great foundation, when things get better, you're already well positioned to grow exponentially faster than those people who hunker down and avoid it. Right? So market share shifts, all these things happen in downturns, because when the companies that shy away get replaced by the companies that are investing in both themselves and their customers, they're the ones that get remembered when things turn around. So if we can really just look at this and ask the question, what's the gift? What's the other opportunities that I'm not seeing here? Let go of the fear, the uncertainties, and the doubts long enough to see what else is possible. That's when things turn around. And that's when you go from being in a place of, I just want to survive, to how do I actually thrive? How do I look at the other side of this and really step into something different? That's what excites me, because this is the time when things really start to change for organizations and businesses who are committed to their customers and the outcomes that they were in business to achieve in the first place.
Yeah, those are excellent points. And I think it was, I don't know if it was you or someone that I came across during coaching. There was a mention of, some of the most productive business leaders are essentially doing two things that are unique, which is, waking up early, and the other one is meditating. So, you mentioned mental health. Do you have any tips or resources that any of our audience members could use in terms of, staying mentally sane, I guess, during these times?
That's a fantastic question. Thank you for bringing it up. Actually, there is a 5-minute free assessment that's available on a website called positiveintelligence.com.
Okay.
And if you go to positiveintelligence.com, the saboteur assessment will actually tell you what shows up for you in times of stress. Okay. So while there's lots of great mindfulness, meditations, things of that nature, what that doesn't do is it doesn't actually help you stop the negative self-talk, because it turns out that there's 10 different flavors of negative self-talk. There is the judge, there's the controller, the avoider. And so like when you start to understand how people react, when we're under stress, we're going to react differently. Controllers like put the hammer down. They're going to control everything. Avoiders run away. They don't want to do anything. Hypervigilance are freaking out about sort of the things not being the way they are. And so when you start to look at victims being, feeling victimized, everybody shows up differently when they're in their saboteurs. So what would be very helpful is to start by understanding what are your biggest saboteurs, because the results of that actual 5-minute assessment show you what to do. Like, how do you actually turn that around? And only when you have control of that piece of this, then you are actually able to say, okay, I can calm myself down in the ways that weaken my saboteurs and increase my sage muscles, which really allows me to be fully present and where I actually am, as opposed to being ridden and hijacked by the things that I'm most fearful of.
Great. Thank you. That was very, very insightful. So Ashwini, I've worked at WeWork for the past 2 years. I think WeWork, out of all other sources that I have, started spreading out tremendous amount of helpful resources in its newsletter, especially the labs directors. You're essentially the head of WeWork's in the tri-state area. WeWork, for those of you that are not aware, WeWork Labs is the world's largest accelerator program that has about 5,400 founders and founding team members in it. So both as an investor as well as the head of WeWork Labs tri-state, what government financial resources are available to entrepreneurs, and how do you think, as an investor, how do you think other VCs are approaching funding companies for their portfolio?
So it's a great, first of all, thanks for having me. And I appreciate this webinar a lot. And I really love the nutrition information. Thank you for that. And also the health information from the doctor, Dr. Rahman. So for WeWork Labs, like I said, that we've been doing two things to really kind of address the shortage for entrepreneurs. I'm looking for the link right now, actually. One of the first things that we've sent out to all of our labs members, and I encourage anyone here who is a business owner who's based in New York to actually just apply for this. The links for the New York State Grant Assistance Program have been sent out to everyone. I'm just going to put it in the chat right now. Hold on today. Yeah, okay. I'm just going to put that in the chat right now. So for New York State and New York City, businesses that have 1 to 4 employees can receive payroll support. Businesses in general can potentially apply to receive grants or loans up to with a 3.75% interest rate to actually help like defray costs if you can prove that your revenues from a year ago at this time have dropped by 25%. So really helpful to a lot of food companies and companies in that space. For the startups and for anyone who really needs capital at this point in time, I think it is a challenging time. There's no question about it. We're seeing two things actually happen. One is that founders that have raised capital and have announced capital raises are actually having VCs reach out to them to offer them more money. Sounds ironic, but actually when you think about it, venture capitalists still have to write checks in this period of time. They still have a fiduciary obligation to their limited partners. They're required to deploy capital within a specific time period. So they're often going to go after right now. They're going to invest in companies they think are strong and give them the more additional money to weather the downturn, right? So like if you prove that you have cash in the bank and you're actually growing or your business is actually in a sound position right now, it can be a good time to raise capital. The second thing that we're seeing is that people who had rounds in progress, so let's say that you started your fundraising round 2 or 3 months ago, you've already talked to your investors, you've circled either what is one or two things are happening. Sometimes the leads are softening and people are pulling out of commitments, or some commitments are still hitting bank accounts. So there is a company that we have that does lab grown diamonds, for example. They were in San Francisco just last week. They were able to still like kind of raise about half their round. So one of the big things that we're telling everyone is if you're able to close the capital now. Don't worry so much about your valuations. It's not that big a deal. It's more important to prove that you can just get the money that you need in the bank account to move forward. And then the third thing that we're seeing are people who would plan to start financing rounds at this point in time. I think that can be a little bit more challenging for people. And especially for first-time founders, if you have not spent your time really working to build your investor base and build relationships with the people you want to fundraise from prior to this. So one of the best things I think a business can do at this point is to write an update and tell people how you're doing to all your investors, all your advisors, potentially your customers, especially if you're an enterprise as well. Like keep people updated that should you want to raise money or should that opportunity come up in the next 2 to 3 months, you're going to be prepped for it because they're hearing from you. I had a founder come to me yesterday who talked about, well, I haven't talked to this angel investor in 6 months. Like 6 months, his business had changed a lot of good things had happened. It's much harder to go back to someone 6 months later when you really need the money if you haven't been keeping them updated along the way. So even though it seems like a strange time to be sharing updates, it's still a time to say like, this is what's going on with me. This is what's going on with our business. This is what we're working on. And this is how we're trying to address the crisis for ourselves. Like relationship building along the way, if you have been doing it, can help you. If you haven't been doing it, it's okay. But like start to think about a way that you can start to build those relationships now going forward. So that's like kind of the summary of what we're seeing in the market. I have been telling people to look at the idea of getting a small business loan. I think it might be an easier time than you would have seen in the past. And what I would say about that is it's not something that startups often do. And, most small business loans are not necessarily set up for this. But I think that if we're really seeing some government programs coming in to be supportive, it could be a good way to explore those options. Through the SBA, the federal SBA, there is a disaster relief email that you can actually send in because they're going to be administering money and they're going to be giving money to the states in order to be able to give out as loans and grants. So those are some options for you to think about.
Excellent. That is very, very helpful. So thanks for sharing, Ashwini. And last but not least, Evelyn, both as a public health professional and the CEO of SAM.ai, you've recently helped out our team in preparing for working from home and also utilizing best practices. Would you mind sharing some of those slides with the audience so that if they wanted to, they could share with their team members?
Evelyn, we're not hearing you.
We're in the same living room. That's my wife. So let me give her the headset.
Evelyn, it'll work when Raz takes the mute off, but he had the headset on. It wasn't hearing you because he had mute on his side. That's why it wasn't working. And Raz, you still have mute on.
All right, Evelyn, if you don't mind, just send me the link and I'll run through it if that's okay.
Oh, now it worked.
Oh, it works, right? Okay, okay, great. So let me start sharing.
It's just very soft, Evelyn.
How about now? Is that better?
I think if you yell, it'll be great.
All right. So we made a presentation for our team, and this is, I mean, this most information, if not all of it, it's under CDC, and I included links to everything, so you can have this just for your own knowledge and to share with your team members. So, for example, this is from John Hopkins, who is tracking the cases worldwide, and then I put some, very factual information from the CDC of how the virus is spread and how, the prevention guidelines, cleaning, washing hands, the basic things that we've been hearing from our local officials and, from the president and from our CDC directors. So I also put in, if some people are still at work, they could, follow these guidelines, but most of us most likely will start working from home. And let me see if this will work. Can you see it? Does everyone see it? Okay, so I looked into to see if there's an exhaustive list that would help most businesses. So Forbes has a great checklist. The first three things are some things that we did internally. We made a checklist of items that our staff needed to work from home. So it'll be dongles, headsets, things like that. And then things that we saw that some staff were lacking that would make it efficient for them to work from home. We ordered them, and so everyone was set. And then we asked individually if they had the capacity to work from home, because some people may not have a setup where they could work from home efficiently. So we talked about those things. And then Forbes has great guidelines as well. For example, create company guidelines, for employees. We don't want them to using streaming only, music videos or whatever. Like you want people to work and have some downtime as well. So we had talked about how you're gonna balance that out in security. And then also before everyone leaves, it would be great if you could train each other how to use remote access tools and such as Zoom and things of that nature. And I included in the slide the link to the Forbes list so everyone could see it. And then one thing is also messaging. You want to empower your staff to become proactive in protecting their health and mental health. So I think everyone has touched upon that. You want people to feel that they can protect themselves by taking preventative measures. And I would always default to the messages that were coming from our CDC, because they, how would say, they word things in a way that's effective and it doesn't confuse general audiences. So always, it's better to listen to your CDC versus sometimes our politicians may, may say things in a way that it's confusing. So you have that. And it's great to check in with staff to increase morale. Most people are not used to working from home. So it's good to check in with people from time to time to see how they're doing emotionally, so they could feel that someone actually cares about their mental health. I did put some CDC posters links here. So in case if you are still working from home, because still working in the office because you have no choice, you could have those. The New York City business guidance, it has like recommendations for different sectors, for restaurants, what they should be doing, for services industry, for tech. So it's exhaustive list of what you should consider during this epidemic and this pandemic, actually. And as Ashwini mentioned, the SBA guidance, and there's a link that I provided on the slide. It talks about the loans that they're actually offering.
No, thank you so much, Evelyn. This is very helpful, and we will make sure that this link is available. This slideshow is available, so in case you want to use it for your staff, you would have access to it. So we'll make sure that's available to everyone. Hopefully, you guys could hear me still. We are at our 30-minute mark. I will now open it up to Q&A. We have quite a few questions. So Ryan, if you don't mind, why don't you field those questions for our panelists, and then see if we could squeeze them in the next 5 minutes.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Can you guys hear me? Everything good?
All good.
All right, perfect. Yeah, I mean, most of the questions that I've seen from everybody have been, will you have access to all of the resources that all of our panelists have been talking about? And the answer is yes. There will be a follow-up, excuse me, there will be a follow-up resource email with all the links, all of the PowerPoints that Evelyn and everyone has talked about. I see a question that just came in, Savannah supply chain. We will also include this as well for anyone that is looking to have some interest in supply chain management during this time of need.
I remember there was a question for Mary Jane about gut health and probiotics. Mary Jane, do you have any feedback on that?
It's a broad question. I would say the takeaway is get it from food, not supplements. I think a lot of people turn to supplements, and there's a lot of advertising that if you take this, it'll boost your immunity, if you take that. Our bodies don't absorb the nutrients from supplements the way we do from food. And in regard to the gut health and the bacteria, eating the foods that I mentioned, they provide the prebiotics, the food that those gut bacteria thrive on. So it really comes down to the nutrition, the food, to boost it. I don't know if that's answering the question. I hope it is.
I think it does to a certain extent. Yeah, I mean, I think we all should, if possible, resort to eating natural food and consume it as much as possible by eating it rather than just pills. But yeah, no, it's very helpful. So I'm going to now sort of try to get some tips from you guys individually so that the audience members could use them potentially. So I'll just start with Dr. Rahman. Dr. Rahman, if there was one tip that you'd give our audience member, what would that be when it comes to their health?
Oh, listen, I very much agree with the nutritionist. I think getting adequate sleep, and as you mentioned, meditation earlier, trying to find space where you actually could refresh your mind and be able to handle all this information that's coming at us and what the appropriate things we should be doing in the setting of an emergency. Many people make bad decisions, and as I think Bill was mentioning earlier, astutely, that we sort of tend to gravitate to whatever psychological profile that we have in the setting of an emergency. And that's why people make bad decisions. Trying to reflect on it, getting adequate sleep, getting adequate nutrition. I agree, not using pills for them. The numerous studies have shown supplementing patients with vitamin C or vitamin E or high doses of folic acid has shown to be detrimental as opposed to trying to get it naturally in foods, but has been helpful. So I think my take would be trying to do all those things to trying to keep ourselves healthy, able to focus and make emergency plans and actions.
Thank you, Dr. Rahman. Mary Jane, one tip that you would have for the audience?
Okay, my tip would be to stay connected to your feelings and emotions about losing control over your structure in your life. Why? Because I can give you all the tips in the world. We can tell you all the things you should do in terms of food. But if you don't know the things that may be getting in the way of you achieving that, why aren't I doing that? It has a lot to do with what's going on inside ourselves. So if we can try to stay connected to our discomfort and how that impacts the where, why, how, when we are eating or not eating or exercising, I think it'll help people to be able to achieve the goals that or the information that I gave them.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Mary Jane. Bill, what is your one tip that you'd have for our audience?
I'm going to stay with the theme of mental fitness. I feel like that, you know, we there's so many things people get overwhelmed with the tips and what you can and cannot do and all these different pieces, but it really is, if you can really focus on staying clear on the outcomes you wish to see, staying healthy. What does it mean? It's, you know, not being hijacked by your emotions to make the right decisions in this time of crises, you know, and really understanding this. This is the best thing you can do for yourself, is keep your mental health strong and be in this place of possibility, as opposed to feeling the negative emotions that are going to take you into a downward cycle, which will lead you to emotional eatings or taking a bunch of supplements you don't need, or just reacting in ways that are not going to be good to your health and the health of your business. You're still on mute, Rez.
Thanks, Bill. Ashwini, what would be that one tip that you would give our audience?
I think that there's two quick tips that I would give. The first one is that it's more important to talk to your teams more than ever. So like, you know, even if like you don't do a daily check-in or a daily stand-up, now is the time to institute it, just to see how everybody's doing, how they're feeling, and just sort of what their intention and goal for the day is. I found that super helpful with my own team. And then the second thing I would say is that in times like this, like people tend to like look at the company that's employing them as a parent. Like, right, like you're responsible for their salary and for their benefits at it, you know, and so that you actually kind of hold more responsibility as a business leader than you have in the past. And sort of like, you know, as anyone relating to a parent can understand, like that means that, you know, people might get more upset, be more emotional, look to you for more support than they would in normal circumstances. So just something to think about as it's in a time of uncertainty.
Great, thank you so much. And Evelyn, last but not least, what tip would you have for our audience?
I would say everyone to have tools that you rely on to keep yourself mentally sane. So if sheets work best for you, whatever tools that you have that works best for your organization, make sure you have it available at home. And you know, this is a time to also find new tools as we're adapting to change. So just be mentally prepared to adapt to change and be proactive.
I really sincerely want to thank every one of you for participating in this panel in such a short notice. I appreciate your time, but most importantly, I appreciate your insight. You know, the way I see it is, you know, the world of success belongs to the optimist, and I think, you know, it's definitely a time of you know, grave concerns from many different aspects, economically, health-wise. But I think, you know, having a level head and being pragmatic about the reality of what we're dealing with, and then dealing with things, you know, one element at a time instead of tackling everything, is possibly what we all need to adhere to. But those of you that are in the audience, thank you. Those of you that are in the panel, thank you again. I will end the meeting now, but you're more than welcome to reach out to me if there's anything else, and we will certainly make sure those that have registered for this have a link to download the video, as well as all the resources that our great audience, great panelists have shared. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Be well. Bye.
You too. Bye.